There is a room in every house that no one built on purpose. It shows up anyway, behind a wall that seems to shift half an inch when nobody is looking, or in the second before sleep, when the mind forgets to guard its doors. You know this room. Everyone does. Not by its shape, but by the pressure of a hand that keeps pushing it shut. Somewhere, an old smith is bent over a piece of iron that will not take the shape he wants. He has been fighting it since morning. Each strike lands wrong. The metal springs back, resists, refuses. And then, at some point in every telling of this old craft, the story turns. The smith stops hammering against the iron's grain and starts listening to it instead. He lets the metal show him where it already wants to bend. The shape that emerges is not the one he first imagined, but it holds. It does not crack under the next blow. This is a story about that turn. Not a technique for beating something into submission, but a much older and stranger idea, whispered in the margins of alchemical manuscripts and dreamed about by a Swiss psychiatrist 400 years later, that the thing you push against with the most force is very often the thing that grows strongest in your hand. This is the truth. There is a phrase that keeps surfacing in different centuries, dressed in different clothes. What you resist, persists. Some Hermetic writers framed it as a law of matter. That pressure creates form, and form pushed against pushes back. Centuries later, Carl Jung would look at the same pattern in the human psyche and give it another name. The shadow? Not evil, not a monster hiding under the floorboards of the self. Simply the parts of us we decided long ago we would rather not carry in the light. Picture that iron again, glowing on the anvil. Picture the smith's arm, tired, insisting. Now picture your own arm, braced for years, against something in yourself you never agreed to look at directly. Temper. A hunger. A grief you filed underhandled. The body remembers what the mind agrees to forget. And it remembers as weight, as tightness across the shoulders, as a held breath that never quite finishes leaving. What would it mean to put the hammer down? Not to give up on shaping anything, but to stop fighting the grain of what is already there. That is the question this reflection wants to sit inside of tonight. Not to answer it in a single stroke, for some questions are not built for that, but to walk its outline slowly, the way you might trace the edge of an old scar with a fingertip, feeling for what it still remembers. Think of water meeting a dam for the first time. It does not vanish because a wall appeared in its path. It pools, it rises, it finds the smallest crack along the concrete and widens it patiently over years until the crack becomes the new riverbed. No engineer designs a dam expecting the water to simply agree to stop existing. And yet so many of us build exactly that kind of wall inside ourselves and expect a different outcome from the one water always gives. There is nothing shameful in the wall. Walls get built for reasons. A hurt too large for the age we were when it happened. A family that had no room for a particular feeling. A version of ourselves that once needed protecting from something real. The wall was at some point an act of care. What this reflection is curious about is not the wall's origin, but its cost. What it takes year after year to keep reinforcing concrete against a pressure that never once stops arriving. Let the room stay closed for a moment longer. We will come back to its door. The first layer of this is the oldest and the most outward-facing. In the language of alchemy, there is a stage before gold, before the shining outcome anyone wants, called the nigredo, the blackening. The base matter is broken down, darkened, made unrecognizable before it can become anything else. Alchemical texts describe this stage with unsettling bodily images. Putrefaction, dissolution, a kind of death that has to happen before transformation can begin. It would be easy to hear this as pure metaphor and stop there. But it is worth sitting with the plainness of the claim underneath the poetry. Nothing golden arrives without first passing through what looks, from the outside, like ruin. Some traditions read the nigredo as a literal stage of laboratory work, heating a substance until it darkens. Others, especially later commentators, read it as a description of the soul's own weather. Either way, the image insists on the same thing. You do not skip the dark stage by refusing to enter it. You only delay it and it waits. There is a companion idea running alongside this one, quieter, but just as persistent. The notion of non-resistance, not passivity. The alchemists were not asking anyone to stop working, but a refusal to fight the material on its own terms, to force gold out of lead through sheer will. The old formula, solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine, assumes a kind of cooperation with the process, not a war against it. You let the thing come apart. Then you let it come back together, changed. Some old diagrams show this as a wheel rather than a line. The substance passing through blackening, then whitening, then a slow reddening, circling back through darkness more than once before anything like gold appears. Not a straight climb toward brightness, but a spiral that keeps returning to the same low place, each time a little differently. Later commentators read this circling not as failure to progress, but as the actual shape progress takes when it is honest. A person healing from something old rarely does it once and finishes. They return to the same ache in their 30s that they thought they had closed in their 20s, and again later, each time with slightly more capacity to hold it without breaking. Here the image begins to change shape the way a river changes shape without ever stopping. What was once a description of metal in a crucible starts to look, unmistakably, like a description of a person under pressure. Someone mid-collapse, someone in the middle of a year they didn't choose, wondering if the blackening will ever end. The alchemists never claimed certainty about what waited on the other side. They only trusted the pattern. That the material, left to its own honest process rather than forced, tends towards something more whole than it started. Which brings the second layer close enough to touch. Carl Jung spent much of his working life circling this same pattern from a different direction, using a different vocabulary, arriving at something strikingly similar. He proposed that every person carries an unlived double, a version of themselves built from everything the conscious self decided was unacceptable, embarrassing, dangerous, or simply inconvenient. He called this the shadow. Not because it is dark in a moral sense, necessarily, but because it lives exactly where the light of ordinary self-awareness does not reach. The shadow is not chosen once and then finished. It is built continuously, every time a person decides that is not who I am and looks away. The anger that got punished too early and learned to hide. The softness that got mocked and learned to harden. The ambition that felt too loud for the room it grew up in. None of it disappears. It goes underground, the way water always finds a way to keep moving even when the surface freezes over. And here is where Jung's clinical observation rhymes, almost exactly, with the alchemist's warning about the iron and the crucible. What gets pushed away with force does not weaken. It concentrates. A feeling denied long enough stops behaving like a feeling and starts behaving like a compulsion. Showing up sideways in the wrong rooms at the wrong volume, aimed at the wrong people. Jung wrote in his own way that the more a person resists the shadow, the more that shadow shapes their life from the outside, appearing as fate, as bad luck, as the same argument happening again with a different face across the table. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from decades of holding a door shut. Not the tiredness of effort, but the tiredness of vigilance. The low hum of always checking that the thing behind the door hasn't moved. Jung's suggestion, radical for his time and still uncomfortable now, was almost the same one whispered by the old alchemical texts. Stop guarding the door. Not because what is behind it is safe in some reassuring sense, but because the guarding itself is the wound that never closes. This is not a claim that everything hidden is secretly good, or that every dark impulse deserves an open door and a welcome mat. That would be its own kind of denial, just inverted. It is closer to something more modest and more demanding. That a thing looked at directly, without flinching and without indulging it, tends to lose the outsized shape it had in the dark. A shadow on a wall looks enormous, until you turn and see the small object casting it. Jung also noticed something stranger, something that tends to surprise people the first time they hear it. The shadow is not only made of what we consider ugly, can hold gifts too. A talent left undeveloped because it embarrassed someone once. A boldness abandoned because it made a parent uneasy. A tenderness buried because it once got mistaken for weakness. The shadow, in this reading, is simply everything exiled from the story we agreed to tell about ourselves, regardless of whether the exiled thing was dangerous or simply inconvenient to the narrative. This is part of why the encounter with it can feel disorienting in both directions. Sometimes heavier than expected, and sometimes unexpectedly lighter, as if something long missing had quietly been returned. Which leads, finally, to the third layer, the one that does not live in old texts or clinical notebooks, but somewhere closer to the chest. Think of something in your own life you have been resisting for a long time. Not a task on a list. Something older than that. A fact about yourself. A memory, a feeling you keep managing instead of meeting. Notice, if you can, what it costs to keep managing it. The vigilance. The small tax paid every day just to keep a door from swinging open. Non-resistance, understood this way, is not surrender. It is not giving up the shape you are trying to become. It is closer to what the smith learns after years at the forge. That force applied against the grain wastes itself, while force applied with the grain becomes precision. The iron was never the enemy. The fight was. Consider how differently a held breath feels from a breath simply allowed to move. The body already knows this distinction, even when the mind has forgotten it can choose. Resistance takes a posture. Jaw set, shoulders climbing toward the ears, a stomach clenched around something it has decided not to feel. Non-resistance takes a different posture entirely, one that has nothing to do with going limp. It looks more like a tree in wind, roots holding firm while the branches are allowed to move with the force instead of snapping against it. There is no promise here that turning toward the room makes what is inside it comfortable. Some traditions describe this turning as the beginning of a longer process, not the end of one. What they seem to agree on, across centuries and very different vocabularies, is simply this: what is faced tends to change its shape, and what is fled tends to keep its shape and follow. The door is still there. It has been there the entire time we have been talking. Nothing about this reflection requires you to open it tonight. But it might be worth noticing just once that your hand has been resting against it the whole time, pushing without you quite deciding to. What follows are not instructions. They are simply a handful of ways people have tried, across different times and different languages, to sit near their own shadow without either fighting it or feeding it. Take what is useful. Leave the rest at the door. 1. Sit somewhere quiet for as long as you can manage without checking the time, and bring to mind a trait in another person that irritates you far more than the situation seems to warrant. Ask gently, without needing an answer right away, where does this live in me? Jung called this kind of irritation a clue, not an accusation. It often points towards something disowned, rather than something simply observed. 2. Choose one memory you tend to skip over quickly when telling the story of your life, not the worst one, just one you rush past. Sit with it a little longer than usual tonight. Not to relive it, but to notice what you feel in the body when you slow down near it. The throat, the chest, the hands, the body often holds what the story has smoothed over. 3. Try writing, without editing, a single page from the point of view of the part of yourself you like least. Let it speak in its own voice without correcting its tone. You are not agreeing with it. You are simply letting it finish a sentence it has been interrupted midway through for years. 4. Notice, over the course of one ordinary day, every moment you brace against a feeling before it fully arrives, the tightening that happens right before sadness, right before anger, right before longing. Practice just once, letting the bracing loosen half a second earlier than usual. See what the feeling does when it is not met at the door by a closed fist. 5. Think of the person, living or gone, that your temperament seems most stubbornly unlike, the one relative, the one old friend, whose way of being in the world you have quietly spent years making sure you never resemble. Ask what it would cost to admit even one small point of likeness. Some traditions hold that our fiercest denials point most precisely at what we carry. 6. Before sleep, instead of reviewing the day for what went wrong, try a different question. What did I push away today, and what would it have looked like to simply let it pass through instead of holding the door shut against it? No need to fix anything found there. Just notice it the way you would notice weather. 7. Sometime this week, sit with a piece of raw material in your hands, clay, wood, dough, anything with a grain or a resistance of its own, and try shaping it first by force, then by attention to how it already wants to move. Feel the difference in your arms. Some traditions used exactly this kind of physical practice to teach a truth the mind alone resists learning. 8. When you catch yourself mid-argument, mid-defense, insisting a little too loudly that something isn't true about you, pause for one breath before continuing. Ask only to yourself, what would it mean if this were partly true? You don't need to answer out loud or even fully answer at all. The pause itself is the practice. 9. Keep a small, private list this week of moments you notice yourself performing certainty you don't quite feel, about your temper, your patience, your goodness. At the end of the week, read the list back without judgment, the way you would read a weather log. Some patterns only become visible once they are written down and looked at from a slight distance. None of these practices promise a door swinging open into light. Some nights, sitting near the room changes nothing you can name. That, too, seems to be part of what the old texts and the old clinicians were both pointing toward. That this is closer to a practice than an event, closer to a way of living beside something than a problem solved once and filed away. What has been offered here is not a claim about how the universe works, and not a secret withheld from most people and revealed now to you. It is one way, among many old and many new ways, of looking at a pattern that keeps showing up wherever people have paid close attention to their own resistance. In metalwork, in dream analysis, in the ordinary ache of holding a door shut for years. Maybe the smith was never really talking about iron. Maybe Jung was never really talking only about patience in a consulting room in Zurich. Maybe both of them, in their very different centuries and their very different languages, were describing the same simple, difficult fact. That a life spent bracing against itself is a life spent standing still. While a life willing to meet its own weight, however slowly, is at least a life still moving. The room is still there. It will likely still be there tomorrow and the day after. No tradition mentioned here claims to know exactly what waits on its other side, and this reflection makes no claim either. What can be said, offered gently and without certainty, is only this: that the hand pressed against the door has been working very hard for a very long time, and it might someday be allowed to rest. And this you already knew.